Plantasia is a cozy sci-fi plant growing game that has a bunch of different narrative elements where you are growing all these plants and gathering all these different species and colors and types to grow your collection and save the planet. And the team has done a really great job of having their own elevator pitches, but since I'm working as a programmer, I guess I'm a little more biased towards I like plant growing and making different collections of plants. But it's a really fun game, and I hope you guys have fun playing it, and we are so proud of what we've done. So what's unique about Plantasia is that it sits at the bottom 1/3 of your screen. So while you're doing things like writing Word documents and sending boring emails, you can have a little notification ever so often that your plant needs to be watered, or it's time to harvest your plant. So it's something unique that took a long time for our old lead programmer Alex to work on. It was something he was extremely proud of, so I can't speak too much on it. But it's been a really fun experience working on a game that has at the bottom 1/3 of your screen. I've never had to do it before. So the feature I'm most proud of right now is the plant combination system. So we have these two different seeds with affixes on them. There are two different species of plants, and you can put them into a table and combine them together based on the percentage of affixes that you have right now on each plant. It will create a brand new plant that is different percentages based on what it is. So it could be either a new type, a new color, a completely new combination of the types. There's a bunch of different options. We had a ton of fun planning out with Aiden all the different combinations, very similar to the game Animal Crossing with the flower breeding system there. So he created all these really awesome combinations that I was able to spend the time in code to program correctly, such as getting the special gold color of plants and the black and the reds and all these different percentages. It was something I've never worked with before, and being able to putting it onto the table to creating it and then putting it back into your inventory and seeing that overall game loop of players creating something brand new is really rewarding for me. So Cave Bear Games went through a lot of changes programmatically. I originally talked about in another section of the interview, which you guys will see either before this, after this, later on, however you'll see it, about our team changing from 2 down to 1 and then up to 3 again in a very rapid succession. Cave Bear Games originally started off with just Alex, actually our other old lead programmer, and he designed a bunch of systems for this game. So a day-night system, which eventually had to get scrapped and due to time, which it may come back, we never know. All these other systems like affixes and how plants are going to be grown, the storage system, management system. All these systems started off completely, utterly differently, not only planning-wise, but also programmatically. So when I came onto the team, Alex gave a really great backbone for a lot of different projects. However, the one thing I struggled with these projects and these little tiny micro projects that we were going to integrate into the overall system is that they weren't very well organized for me. Now, this may be something that programmers don't really realize they're doing, is that it might work for you, but if you're trying to bring on somebody else, they're not going to understand the way you have things worded unless you put something like comments or some sort of diagram, which we had half and half of that. We had either comments, very bare bone diagrams, or nothing at all. And some of these systems connected to each other in very specific ways where if you modified it, it would break. It was very difficult for me to do for some of these things, but sometimes I ended up just scrapping it all together, which is very painful for a programmer. Something we need to do though. So when Alex decided he was going to step down, and I didn't have that resource to ask him questions, especially with the time zone differences with our programming team at the time, I decided I'm going to go through the whole entire systems, and I'm going to either delete it, write up every single thing we need to do for this system and give it to another team member, or I am going to try to, skeleton crew, put it all together into something that works. It was painful. It took me about 2.5 weeks to do it, but now we have a really solid programming team that I'm very proud to say I can go into somebody else's code, and if they are sick or they need more time to work on something else or they want me to jump in, that I can happily do that. And these systems include very complex systems, including the whole planting loop, such as putting the seed from your inventory, putting it into a planter, interacting with it with all these different, like, I need growing, I need watering, and then putting it back into your inventory, and then using that seed in the plant family system, which is you combine all the seeds together, or selling it and getting money for the crafting system, and the crafting system gives you other things. So they all interact with each other, and it's in an extremely healthy environment where if I need to go in and modify somebody else's system, I can do so safely and then just let them know. Not many projects have that, and as someone who's sitting here from the start, almost from the start, at the moment from when Alex came on and brought me on as doing the plant loop, I realized that once Alex left, that if we were going to continue working on Cave Bear games productively, that I needed to do this, and I am very happy to do it, and I'm very proud that I did. It's something I've never done before, but it's something that I think is important to highlight in the process of Cave Bear games, as it's something that I had to speak with Ayla about. Like, I need the time while you guys are doing interviews to clean this up to bring anybody on. And I needed to be there for those interviews to make sure that those new programmers knew that this is how it's going to work, and if you can't adapt to that, then I can't have you on Cave Bear games. I'm not going to throw away all the progress that we made just so you can have your own programming coding style. Now, people still have programming styles in here. They name things differently, but I make sure every single time we have a programming meeting every Sunday, which is extremely important, chatting with your team verbally, not just through a chat, that everybody is on the same pace, they keep track, they have their own separate branches in GitHub. Nobody ever merges unless we're in that verbal meeting together. And we have a branch that is completely safe from any merging that I manage, that once we're all ready to merge into dev, it goes right to main, and then we create a build for the rest of the team to work on. This process, I think, has created a very healthy environment here, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So music is a very important part of Plantasia. It originally started off with Alex working with Andy on creating this system that worked with our music and different channels, as well as SFX, and how all of them were starting to blend into each other. With Alex stepping down, music was also something I was really interested in. He already knew a lot of different things about music, much more than me, so I was very happy that Alex decided with his knowledge to take up the project with Andy. However, with him stepping down, I then stepped into the position of doing music with Andy. And I came into a system that was very bare bone, and to be honest with you, it was one of the most painful things I had to scrap and completely restart with Andy. Just because I didn't know what was going on, how things were labeled, and I didn't really have Alex there as a support as he was working on things in life. Here comes in with Andy, and Andy has this beautiful documentation for me of how he wants all the music to flow into each other at different timings, and it was really refreshing to work with a music producer that knew music like he did, and he was able to explain all these terminologies that I can't even tell you what he explained to me, but it was really nice just to sit on a 5-hour call. Now, I wouldn't say to ever do this for anybody, to do a 8 a.m. 5-hour call till 1 or 2 o'clock in the evening, but we were able to hit and bang out all of the background music with every single transition, all 26 soundtracks that progress throughout Plantasia. Now, we have another plan to do another 6-hour meeting for the sound effects as well, but it's been a really interesting process, and unfortunately, I wish we could have started it sooner. But music is such an important part of Plantasia, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. And while Andy can talk more about the technical side of it, it was a very big honor for me to be able to implement it for Andy into the game and get his advice live as he's like, oh, I think we need this timing here, or I'm going to go modify the music here and give it back to me. And it's going to be an ongoing process, I believe, as we start developing more of the music and he's able to play it and see it and understand how it feels. But it's definitely something you guys should just sit with his soundtrack and listen to. It is kind of a surreal experience, as I had to do that afterwards and kind of report to Andy some of the comments. But it'd be really great for you guys to do that and support Andy in any way possible. So all this lovely music that I was able to spend time with Andy and implement, and then pass off to Aiden to work on some beautiful concept art, as well as finalized art for the album covers, is going to be on Spotify. So instead of having to sit with our game open, which I would appreciate you racking up those hours for us, You can go watch and listen on Spotify in your car, on your phone, or as you're working out. Any place that you need, it will be on Spotify. So go listen there. So creating Plantasia to be at the 1/3 bottom of your screen was a lot of challenges, and frankly, I didn't work too much on them, but it was something that Alex would come to me and ask for advice on what can we do here. There were a couple other projects that we looked on itch.io that worked with, let's make a transparent game that worked throughout your screen. I can't name names, but we looked at a lot of projects that actually decided to break in the version of Unity that we looked at. A lot of times we were looking at all these references, and then Alex would program them, and he would pass them to me, like, is there anything wrong with this? Why isn't it working? And it was a very head-scratching moment, like, what is going on here? Granted, I can't tell you what the solution that Alex came up with, but it was something he was extremely proud of. It was something that he spent almost all of his time on Plantasia dedicated to making this seamlessly work. Not only the visual transition of once you load it, it shows the Plantasia and the white bar that normal windows have disappears and then it locks to the bottom of your screen. That was something he was extremely proud of. And once I saw it working, I was like, oh my gosh, we can actually do this. This is going to be so great. To getting the audio to actually work properly. So we had to fade in with the audio fading in at the same time, getting that to work while the transition of switching it from actual window to a borderless window to detaching to your screen. We had to delay some of the things from actually loading for that to work. And then working with Steph, our UI UX person, they had to design tons of different user interfaces for the bottom 1/3 of your screen, which may seem like, oh, that should be pretty simple. It's way far not. And Unity decides to be different from the way that the designer works. So a lot of times Steph would make things that were at 20 font that just decided not to work in Unity, or when we changed the plant ID to be something longer, it would go off the screen. So working on that 1/3 while keeping it accessible for people was something that Steph and all the other programmers working with her stuff had to deal with. It's a very different animal working at 1/3 of your screen, and you would think, oh, there's less real estate, I don't have to put stuff in there as much, but you're actually more strategic on where you put things. So it's very important to have accessibility and things that are not too flashy while it's being a productivity tool for Plantasia. That was one of our main things, is that you can work on, emails or PowerPoints while you're playing the game, but also that it's functional for someone who wants to actually play, or sure, they're looking at the bottom of their screen, but they're comfortable looking at the bottom 1/3. So one of the things I wanted to highlight again is that our team, the programming team, changed very quickly, very rapidly, and we had to, not only myself have to adjust, but also having to step up from just a general programming role to someone who's a lead position role. I've kind of always taken a step in a lead position role as an animator, but I've never had the courage or the chance to step up as a programmer. When I was originally joined the team, there was one other programmer who was our lead programmer, Alex. Awesome guy, and he's been working on a ton of things in his life, and he just had to step down, and which is understandable, and things happen on teams like that. And I've kind of already understood that in the game design development sphere, but I never had to be the one to step up to be the lead. And Ayla came to me that we wanted to bring on 2 more programmers. Originally, it was only going to be 1 for our narrative and our request progression system, but I wanted to bring on another person to work on our crafting system, which is super important, and I think we needed that person. But it took me a long time to not only divvy up the things that I was working on, but also make a step guide and clean up all of our code to make sure that those 2 programmers not only felt comfortable coming onto the team, but they knew jumping in that A, I was a resource for them, and B, they could read and understand the code, and C, they could make code that matched what was already in their game at the level that we needed to professionally. Even though we're a junior team, it's extremely important for me as the lead developer to have code that is readable, which is something in the industry, which I've heard from thousands of people, is a very struggling thing, that people don't have code, that juniors are struggling to get into the industry and read and understand the code. So for having a team that's a little bit different, I feel like Cave Bear Games deserved that extra time, and it was a proud moment for me to be able to step up into the lead role and do that. One of the things I wanted to highlight is the idea of change, and that change is okay to happen. It took me a little while on this project to not get frustrated with myself or think of that as in a negative way, that change is something bad when it's actually something really good. For example, with our greenhouse, the greenhouse started off extremely simple. It was just an inventory for seeds and an inventory for materials. It looked extremely bare bones, and then Steph worked her magic to make it beautiful. And then the team went, this isn't really functioning for what we need it to function with. So after I spent so much time programming this, I felt a little defeated that I had to rework this entire thing again. But I understood why, and it made me have a learning point and realizing that it's actually a good thing to change something to something that's better and to spend that extra time learning how to do that change. Now, the greenhouse, again, is going through another revamp, and I've kind of come to a different mindset that I'm actually really excited for this change. It's something that I can not only hone my skills programmatically, but also make it that it's more functional for our players, where once you guys start playing the game, it'll be something that you guys use daily, constantly, every time you open up the game, rather than something as an afterthought. In high school, I was an animator. It was a pretty difficult industry to get into and a lot of hours. I spent a long time sitting with my parents and fighting with them to be an animator, and they were like, no, we're not going to pay for college for you to be an animator. So my second interest was programming, which they were heavily trying to get me into, and even though I did love it, I loved animation more. In comes the gaming industry in college, where it's game design and development. I get to work on some animation stuff, while also doing programming and kind of explore games in a more personal sense for me. And I was doing that as my final project in my programming class for Java. It was a game. So I decided, let me go all in and go to Rochester Institute of Technology for game design and development. And that led me to doing my master's also in game design and development, specifically UI, UX, and exploring how users interact with games. So that whole entire genre of games, but that specifically is my greatest interest. But it all started and stemmed from animation. So Cave Bear Games has helped me develop my skills in two different areas. The first one I'll talk about is programming. A lot of my projects besides my master's project, and even then I'll say my master's wasn't as in-depth as Cave Bear Games, was very 16 weeks or even shorter than that, very short sprints. Team was working weekly with short meetings, and it wasn't as passionate as Cave Bear Games. So it's been really nice to have a project where not only do I have two other programmers, and we even had our old programmer, Alex, be able to chat with them and come up with ideas, but also be able to combine everybody's together. Because a lot of those projects, it was only me or one other programmer, and we kind of stayed in two separate areas and never really interacted besides on a merge day. So it's been a lot more interactive there, and it's helped me develop my skills as a programmer to make sure that I'm in line with all the other programmers. Secondly, Cave Bear Games has helped me develop my skills working as a team. So a lot of my other projects we would submit during the first or second week. Here's our idea, here's our pitch, our professors would approve it, and then the programmers would just start going for however long it is, while the art team would create assets that were pre-approved, and the story was kind of already just being fleshed out. With Cave Bear Games, it's been a very much evolving process. So I've been working with Steph to get all of the UI UX working, working with Andy to get all the sound working, and working with everybody else, all the artists, the game producers, the game designers, the narrative. It's been really nice to be able to develop those skills on a team that I wasn't actually able to get on my college level. Even in my master's degree, we kind of just stayed separate, and then we just came together in 1 week to chat about how it went. So Cave Bear Games has really given me that time to develop that skill of actually working on a proper team. So Cave Bear Games' mission is pretty much 100% in line with my goals. First off, as a junior myself, I just stepped in May into the software development industry. I wasn't even though I went to college for games, I had a hard time finding in the games industry. I didn't really like the way the gaming industry was at the time in May, so I decided to go for something software development where I could still hone in on my skills, but also work on programming. But Cave Bear Games was that really nice in-between where I can also hone in my skills for C# with other juniors. A lot of my team is senior developers and I'm the only junior at the moment, so it's really nice to be able to work with other juniors and create something that's actually really beautiful. Secondly, obviously, education and passion. I'm very passionate about games, and unfortunately, despite not being able to get into the industry, I'm still able to develop that passion in a game that is something I want to work on. Something that I also was kind of dreading going into the industry was working on something that I wasn't really interested in. I'm not a big FPS person or very picky on RPGs, so when I was thinking about going into the gaming industry and having to work on a project I might not be as dedicated on, it's really nice breath of fresh air to work on something passionate with Cave Bear Games, while also doing the educational pillar of learning something brand new, such as a save system, which I've never done before. None of my games had the in-depth level of need for a save system that Cave Bear Games has, or the beautiful UI UX development that this game has. It's been very important to me to side with Cave Bear Games' mission and be the best support I can be, not only just for my team, but for other juniors in the industry looking to get in or doing something like Cave Bear Games. The advice I would give to myself at the beginning of this project is don't be afraid to go all out. A lot of the projects I was in, a lot of my ideas were kind of shut down, or people were saying, no, we don't really have time for that. Let's not even think of an idea of even shortening or making something smaller that makes this work. This project with Cave Bear Games, everybody wants to hear what you want to have to say. If there's something that's interesting, they'll incorporate it. If there's an idea that you say, I want to program, they'll definitely do it. So something that I would tell myself is don't hold back like you did in all your other projects. So creating Plantasia to be at the 1/3 bottom of your screen was a lot of challenges, and frankly, I didn't work too much on them, but it was something that Alex would come to me and ask for advice on what can we do here. There were a couple other projects that we looked on itch.io that worked with, let's make a transparent game that clicked work throughout your screen. I can't name names, but we looked at a lot of projects that actually decided to break in the version of Unity that we looked at. A lot of times we were looking at all these references and then Alex would program them and he would pass them to me, like, is there anything wrong with this? Why isn't it working? And it was a very head-scratching moment, like, what is going on here? Granted, I can't tell you the solution that Alex came up with, but it was something he was extremely proud of. It was something that he spent almost all of his time on Plantasia dedicated to making this seamlessly work. Not only the visual transition of once you load it, it shows the Plantasia and the white bar that normal windows have disappears and then locks to the bottom of your screen. That was something he was extremely proud of. And once I saw it working, I was like, oh my gosh, we can actually do this. This is going to be so great. To getting the audio to actually work properly. So we had to fade in with the audio fading in at the same time, getting that to work while the transition of switching it from actual window to a borderless window to detaching to your screen. We had to delay some of the things from actually loading for that to work. And then working with Steph, our UI UX person, they had to design tons of different user interfaces for the bottom 1/3 of your screen, which may seem like, oh, that should be pretty simple. It's way far not. And Unity decides to be different from the way that the designer works. So a lot of times Steph would make things that were at 20 font just decided not to work in Unity, or when we changed the plant ID to be something longer, it would go off the screen. So working on that 1/3 while keeping it accessible for people was something that Steph and all the other programmers working with her stuff had to deal with. It's a very different animal working at 1/3 of your screen. And you would think, oh, there's less real estate. I don't have to put stuff in there as much, but you're actually more strategic on where you put things. So it's very important to have accessibility and things that are not too flashy while it's being a productivity tool for Plantasia. That was one of our main things, is that you can work on, emails or PowerPoints while you're playing the game, but also that it's functional for someone who wants to actually play or sure they're looking at the bottom of their screen, but they're comfortable looking at the bottom 1/3.